Hello everyone, thank you for joining the Basic Rules webinar. Let's get started with the housekeeping, the legal disclaimer, and I will leave this up for just a minute to let you read that. Next, if you have any questions related to this webinar, you can use the chat feature in the GoToWebinar, and one of the consultants we have on the call with us will answer you. Any other questions can be answered with our direct support at 1-800-342-2599. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Allie Whitaker, and I'm the Professional Services Training Team Lead here at Calix Software. Today we're going to be covering the basics of rules. First, the purpose of rules, what you use them for, what types of rules that there are that you can create. We're going to walk through creating some of the rules and look at how the rules function inside of a file. And we'll walk through some examples of rules that you can use inside of your system. So first up, the purpose of rules. So business rules are a great way that you can have your business be compliant. You can require fields that are frequently missed by your LOs or your processors, or use the rules to move a file status forward in your loan process. You can also disable fields. So if you don't want certain fields to be editable during the process, you can have those disabled and that will grayed out. You've also got the ability to display a reminder message for your user. You can also apply rules to individuals or to your user groups. Very customizable. There are 4 types of rules inside of PointCentral that you can build. You've got a state license, a required field, a disable field, and then a custom message. The state license rule allows you to select the states that you as a company or individual are licensed in so that they can't originate a loan in a state that they are not licensed in. So this helps with your compliance. The user can't save or print any document if they have a state in there that they are not licensed in. And we'll walk through setting up one of these. A required field rule allows the admin to pick a certain field inside of Point that they want to have information filled into, and then that field is required before the user can save or print. When the rule is triggered, the user is going to see a dialog box that appears in the top right telling them what field is required for them to move forward. Best practices with a required field rule is to keep the fields as common fields that your users are frequently using, since the pop-up dialog box is not going to tell them how to get there or link them to that field. A disable field rule is kind of the opposite of the required field. This makes the field unavailable for that user to edit, so it's going to be like a read-only field for them. And the 4th kind of rule that we have is a custom message. A custom message rule allows the admin to create a message for the user when a rule fires. So they could use that to direct them to where the field is if they want to require a field to be filled in, or they could use it just as a reminder to pop up to have them update a status or fill in a different field. Inside of custom messages, there are hard stops and there are soft stops. The hard stop will not allow the user to save until that rule has been fixed. So if they have a required field, for example, they will have to go in and fill in that field before they can continue on. With a soft stop or a reminder, these can be warnings or just notes to the user to remind them. So this is where the admin can build in a message reminding them to look at certain fields or to do certain steps, but it will not stop the user from saving or from printing in that file. Let's go ahead and open our PointCentral and we can walk through each of these rule types inside of that program. All right, we're inside of PointCentral here. We're going to go to the tan box on the far left. In the middle, we've got rules there. So I'm going to expand that. You've got add rule, that'll allow you to create a rule, and then list rule. So let's click on add here. And we're going to start with that first rule that we covered, the state license. I'm going to call this one state license as our example. And click on add rule. This is going to open up our rule, allowing us to create this. Underneath the name up at the top, you have a description area. This is not a required area, but you can add in what you are trying to accomplish with this rule. So if somebody later comes in and is the admin for the system, they would know what you were trying to accomplish with this rule. Below that is the rule type with the drop down. And here you can see the 4 types of rules that we covered. You can select your rule type here. I'm going to select our state license. And you can see below all of the states have come up with check boxes here. Now the purpose of the state license rule again was to allow a user to only originate in a state that they are licensed in. So inside of here, you would go through and make check boxes on the states that they are licensed in. I'll go ahead and put one in Texas, and then you can save that. There's also 2 buttons down at the bottom here that you'll see, select all and unselect all. So if they are licensed in all states or most states, rather than having to check all of those check boxes, you could go and select all and then deselect several that you didn't need. That just helps it be a little more efficient. I'm just going to leave it on Texas for our example. When you've built out your rule, you want to scroll down to the bottom. There's 2 buttons down here. The update rule, that is your save button. You do want to make sure that you click that anytime you make changes inside of your rule. So let's go ahead and click that one. It is going to take you back to the top of the screen, and you can see in red we've got the rule information has been updated. So now you know your rule has been saved. Let's scroll back down to the bottom. The other button that we had down here is the Edit User Access. So right now we've built out a rule only allowing the user to originate in Texas. This rule is currently not assigned to anyone, so it's not going to fire on anyone's system. We have to add the users that we want it to appear in their system. So that's what the Edit User Access button is for. So if we click this, you've got 2 ways to add access. The top section is by user groups. This is probably the most common and the easiest. You can select which group you want this rule to apply to, and everyone inside that group will then have that rule applied to their system. The bottom section is individual users. So if you do want to add, for example, with this state license, this could be Bob's license, and he's only licensed in Texas, so we could put just Bob down here. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add the groups. So I'm going to click the Add Group Access Rights button. This is going to bring up all of your user groups that you have inside of PointCentral. So you would select the group that you would like to have on your rule. You can have more than one, but you can't select more than one in this list. It will just click to the next. So you're going to select the circle of the group that you want to add, click the Add Group Access Rights. That group will then disappear from your list, and then you can continue on. I'm going to also add LOs to this rule. Click Add Group Access Rights again. And those 2 groups are now added to my rule. Let's move on to the second type of rule, which is the required rule. So I'm going to go back over to our left with the rules, click Add Rule here, and we're going to work on a required field. When I'm naming the rules up top, I like to put in required if it is a required field, disabled if it's disabled, and then a small description of what I am requiring. In this one, we're going to have the loan originator's name be required. So I'm just going to put required LO. This will help you later when you have a list of all of your rules and you're needing to figure out which one you need to either edit or turn off. This is an easy way for you to be able to tell what the rule does. So let me click Add Rule down here. That's going to create our rule. And we're going to go to that rule type dropdown. In this dropdown, we're going to pick the required fields. And in the definition section below, we're going to have a required field section. This has a dropdown, so you can look and see what types of items or fields that you would like to require in here. You can start typing. That will bring up some options for you. Or if you just know the field ID number from inside of Point, you can type that as well and it'll bring the field up for you. I'm going to start typing in loan originator because that's what I would like to require in my loan. And you can see it brings that up to the top of my list. I'm going to select that from my list here. And then to the right of that, you can see a green plus symbol. I need to click that for it to become a required field. Right now, it's just sitting in the drop-down list. So now I've got the loan originator field being required. It's inside of that box. And you can add as many items as you'd like inside of this box for your rule, and all of those fields will be required. Unlike the state license rule, the required, disabled, and custom message rules have an additional section. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit so we can see this conditions section. The conditions section is when you want the rule to fire. If you leave this condition section blank, it's going to fire on that file immediately. So we're going to leave this one as is right here with no conditions. And what we're saying here is that there's no conditions, meaning that we would like the rule to fire all the time. This rule, when a user opens up a file, will require them to put in their loan originator before they can save the file at all. We've got nothing down here currently in our conditions, so what that will do to a file is that will require your fields all of the time. In this rule, they would open up their loan and immediately before they could save, they would be required to enter their loan originator. We will work on building out some conditions after we finish this rule. So let's scroll down to the bottom. And we've got our two buttons down here. Let's click the update rule. That's our save button. So we've saved our rule. And I'm going to scroll back down to the edit user access and click that. This again is who we're adding to the rule. So I recommend when you're inside of your required, disabled, or your custom message rules that when you create them, you test them on yourself first to make sure they're doing what you expect the rule to do. Then you can come back in and switch it over to the users that you want it to fire on. So first, I'm going to click on the Add Individual Users Access, put it only on myself, so that we can test it. I am this top one. I'm going to click Add User Access Rights. So this rule currently is only on my system. So what you want to do is you'll go back into Point. You need to log out and log back in for any of the changes you've made inside of PointCentral to take effect, and then we can test this rule. So let's go over into our Point and we'll test this. So once you've logged out of Point and logged back in, I would select a brand new loan. So I'm going to click New up top here. Just blank file works. And you can see in the lower section, the originator, that is red. That is a required field for us to save. So that tells you right off the bat that you do have to fill that in. So if I go up to click on Save and I haven't filled that in, it's going to give us the notification at the top that the loan originator cannot be blank. So we will have to fill that in before we are able to save our file. Let's jump back over to our PointCentral. We've tested that rule in our point system. We saw that the rule has worked for us. I'm going to go back into our rule itself, and we're going to work on the conditions section. So I'm going to scroll down just a little. So this is when we want the rule to fire. So in the first example, we left it blank, and that will make the rule fire at the very beginning when you're opening your file. You can't save it without putting the required fields in. But what if we want the loan originator to be required at a later point? We don't want it just if they've just opened the file. This is when you can add the conditions. So the conditions are the fields as well. So let's say we want to require the loan originator to be filled in after the loan originator has put in the customer's first and last name. So our condition part is when they've entered their first and last name. So let's hit that Add Condition button, and it adds this bottom field. This has the same drop down as the required field, so you can see the fields that you can use in here. Again, you can also start typing in here, and that will fill in the field for you. So we wanted the borrower's first name. Let's just start typing that in. And it does bring up the option for borrower's first name. It also has that field ID out to the right. So I'm going to select the borrower's first name. And then this bottom drop down right below that, this is where it can trick some people. We've got some options down here that help us narrow the condition even further. So with this one, we're saying when the borrower's first name is filled in that we want our condition to fire. So the drop down right below the borrower's first name, this gives you the ability to tell the rule what you want it to look at for that borrower's first name. Or the most frequently used options is going to be the is blank and is not blank. The is blank option refers to there being nothing entered into that field inside of Point. The is not blank means that somebody has put in text or filled in that area inside of Point. That's how I think about that. So in the rule that we're creating, we want when the LO has filled in the borrower's first name. So that means that the borrower's first name would not be blank because the LO has filled in a name there. So I'm going to go ahead and select is not blank in our option here. And that completes that first condition. You can also add other conditions. So if we wanted to have the borrower's last name, you would follow the same process. You would add your condition, come into the drop down, you can start typing. I'm going to say borrower and it brings up our list. This time I'll select the borrower's last name. And I also want when they have filled in the borrower's last name for the rule to fire. So that can be the trickiest part, filling out that drop down there of when you would like the rules to fire. After you've added more than one condition, you're going to see in the middle of the screen above that conditions gray bar an extra drop down that wasn't there before. It says this rule runs for prospect and borrower and will apply when, and this is blank, of the following conditions are met. So this drop down has an all or one. Majority of the time you're going to want all to be in there. So you want all of these conditions that you've put in below to be true, and then the rule above the required field will fire. Once you've built out your rule, the easiest way to see if you've built out what you are looking to require is to read it from the bottom to the top. So you're going to start with those conditions, and then you'll read up to what is being required. So let me read this rule for you. We've got when the borrower's last name is not blank and the borrower's first name is not blank, then the required field of loan originator will be required in the file. So it's helpful after you've built out your rule to read it from the bottom up to see if you've got what you're expecting the rule to happen. Of course, we're going to go in and test this, and then you can see if it is firing the way you expect. So let's scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to update our rule. Again, that's our save button. And then scroll back down and click our Edit User Access. So again, my name is in this one because we earlier were in this one and we were just modifying it right now. Again, I like to have it where you test it on yourself first before putting it on other users, just to make sure that you have what you expect to happen in your file. So we're going to go back into our point system. You're going to need to log out and log back in, and then we can test this rule out on a new file. So let me open up Point here. Back in Point here, I'm going to go over to File and close this loan out, not save it, and then do my file log out. That is the fastest way to get back into your system rather than closing it altogether. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click New Loan, and we can test our rule. So in the rule that we just set up, we said that if the LO entered a first and last name of the borrower and then went to save it, that it would require the loan originator name. So let's test that. And you can see right here the message on the top right, the loan originator field cannot be blank, and it has highlighted that red for them. You can see that our test has worked. We've got first and last borrower name, and then our rule has fired. Let's go back over into our PointCentral, and we can start on our disable rules. So back inside of PointCentral here, let's go ahead back to our rules and create a disable rule for us now. I'm going to click on Rules and Add Rule. And again, we're going to name this. So I'm going to say Disable. And in this example, I'm going to say that after the lock desk has locked a rate for us, we're going to disable the note rate. So I'm going to put that in there as our example. And click Add Rule. So again, the same format at the beginning. We need to select the rule type from the drop-down, and we're going to select the disable fields. It looks identical to the required fields layout. So in your disabled fields, you're going to do the exact same thing as you did with the required. What fields do you want to be disabled? And in this one, I want the note rate to be disabled. So I can start typing that in. Or again, if I know the field ID number, I can type that in. I'm going to select it from the list here and click that green plus. That's going to add it into my disabled area. All right, and let's scroll down. Again, we've got our conditions area. So conditions is, again, when you want the rule to fire. So right now, with no conditions, that note rate field would be grayed out for everyone. They wouldn't be able to fill that in. So we want to tell the rule when we want it to fire. So in my example, we want it to fire after the lock desk has put in that the loan is locked. We could do that on the fee worksheet that has a locked area, or we can do it off of the expiration date. I'm going to go off of the number of days locked in to trigger our rule. So I'm going to add a condition down here. And let's see if lock-in days. So locked in does not bring up the field ID that I want. So this, I would go back into Point and find the field ID reference number that I would like and then put that down here. So let's pause and go back into Point and grab that field ID number so we can create our rule properly. So when I'm looking for a field ID, I always like to go up to Utilities menu at the top and then down to the Load Field ID option at the bottom and pick Borrower. This is going to load all of the field IDs for every field. So I'm going to go over to the fee worksheet. That's over on the left. And then you can see up here at the top, rate lock period, and it has a number in there that's 6062. So that is our field ID that we want to use for our rule. So we're going to take that one back in and plug that into our condition. So we're going to take that number and plug it in here. So it was 6062, and you can see then lock term pulls up. So we're going to use that. And then we've got that drop down again. And we have other options in this drop down, but I'm going to use is not blank. So that means that the lock desk or someone has filled in that lock term period with a number of days. It's not blank inside of our file, and our note rate will then be disabled for us. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, click our update rule, that's our save button. Scroll back down, edit our user access, and I'm going to add myself so we can test this. Then we're going to go back inside of Point, do our log out, and log back in so we can see the new rule and test that. All right, go ahead and close this and log out for us. And log back in. Again, the fastest way to get back into your system. And then I'm going to click on a new loan so we can test this rule. This rule, we went off of the fee worksheet. So we said if someone had filled in that number of lock days, that it would then gray out our note rate. So let's go ahead and put in a 30-day lock here. Click Save. You can see right above that a couple fields. The interest rate is now grayed out. This will now not allow us to change that field. All right, let's go back into PointCentral for our final rule type, the custom message. All right, we're going to go back to our rules here and add a rule. This is going to be our last rule, the custom message. And the custom message, I'm going to select it from the drop down here, is a little different from the required or the disabled in that it gives the ability to actually type in a message that will pop up for the user. This is great if you need to direct them to where to go inside of Point, or you want to use it as a reminder just to show them that they need to look at a certain screen before they continue on. What I'm going to do for our example here is remind them to fill in the mortgage insurance rate if their loan is a conventional and above 80% LTV. So I'll show you the two ways that you can do it as a hard stop or as a reminder. So inside of this message box, you can type anything that you would like. I'm going to pretend that my users don't know where the mortgage insurance button is. And so I'm going to use this message box to direct them to that. So I'm going to put in here, please enter MI rate, and I'm going to tell them where that screen is. I'm going to put borrower's information screen at bottom, MI tab. So I've told them that they need to go enter that MI rate and where that tab can be found. You can see above what we just entered, there is a yellow triangle. This is a warning. So currently right now, the rule that we're creating would just pop up with a warning telling them to go enter their mortgage insurance rate, but it wouldn't stop the user from saving their file or from printing anything. So this is the soft stop that we've got inside of the custom messages. If you do want to change it to a hard stop, meaning they have to fix whatever you've got in your rule, kind of like the required, then you would click the checkbox above that, the do not continue without all conditions. And once you click that checkbox, it makes that icon into that red exclamation point, and now they will have to fix whatever you've put in your conditions. Now we're going to go down and work on the conditions here. So unlike the required fields that we had up at the top, everything is now going to be down in the conditions area. So every field that we want the rule to look at. So the first one that we want to look at obviously is that mortgage insurance rate. So we want to know if that mortgage insurance rate is not filled in, then we want them to fill it in. So we're going to click add a condition here, and we'll type in and see if our mortgage insurance rate comes up. There we are, the mortgage insurance rate, the first renewal right here. Again, if you didn't know what the field ID was, you could go in and pull up that utilities and all of the field IDs to look at those. So again, then we have the option of our drop down. So in the conditions down here, we're saying if that mortgage insurance rate, if they haven't filled it in. So if they haven't filled that part in, it's going to be blank. So we want to see if the insurance is blank, then our rule will fire. And let's keep building on that. We want it to be also for a conventional loan. So we're going to add another condition, and we're going to type in a conventional loan. So let's see if that pulls up. It does. It has loan type conventional here for us. So we can select that one. And this one in our drop down, we're going to pick is not blank. So that means that they have selected their file as a conventional. So it is difficult, the is blank and is not blank. I always, again, think of it as it's filled in or it's not filled in inside of the file. So loan type here is not blank, meaning they have selected it. And let's add that last condition here. We want the LTV to be above 80, and that would then require them to put in mortgage insurance. So let's type in LTV. It does pull up for us. I'm going to select that. And this option, we're not going to put if it's blank or not blank. We need it to be a number. So we're going to put greater than because we want it to be larger than 80. Now you don't need to put a percentage in here because point doesn't have a percentage inside the actual field. It's just referring to the actual number that is inside of that field inside of point. So you don't need dollar signs or percentages, any of that. This one has the most conditions out of any that we've built out today. So let's read this one from the bottom to the top to look at what we've made happen with this rule. So starting at the bottom, if our LTV is greater than 80% and the loan is conventional and the mortgage insurance rate is blank, so they haven't filled that in, then we're going to have this message pop up that says, please enter MI rate and telling them where to go. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here, again hit our update rule, our save button. Scroll back down and put ourselves on the rule so we can test it. And then we can log back into Point and test that on a new file. All right, I'm going to close this loan for us. File log out. Again, that is the fastest way to get in and out of your Point when you are doing these rules. And start a new loan up there. Okay, so inside of this rule that we made, we said if the loan was a conventional, we've got the checkbox in conventional over here. And now we need to add in the LTV being above 80%. So let me go add in a loan amount for us. And we've got an LTV now. So let's go ahead and try to save this and see if our rule fires. So you can see in that top right, we've got the custom message that we typed in. It tells us please enter the MI rate, borrow information screen at bottom, the MI tab. So we could close this and they would know exactly where to go and they could enter their rate here. Click OK, and it should now allow them to save. And it does. We now have a file number because they have completed all of those items in the required conditions area. And once you have made sure that your rules do work, go back into the rule and you can look at your user access rights. So this is the MI rule we just built. I'm going to click the Edit User Access. I can remove it off of myself here. Say yes, I want to do that. And then add it to the correct people that you want the rule to fire on. So if I want to add it to user groups, again, I can click on that, put it on my LOs, click Add User Group, and then add it on anybody else that I need. So I only put it on myself at the very beginning so I can walk through and verify that the rule is doing what I expect it to do before I put it on my other users. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope you received some helpful information today. If we didn't get to your question during this webinar, we will reach out shortly with that reply. At the end of this session, you will receive a 5-question survey. We would appreciate you completing it so we can improve our training program and follow up with you if you so choose. To further assist you, a recording of the webinar will be available through the Calix customer portal very soon. Have a great rest of your day.